All right, I want to end this section on the sensory component of this with a few random considerations you might use. They might come in handy for you while you're dealing with somebody on the spectrum in a call that we always seem to get, which is without a lot of information. So I just want to give you a few kind of considerations, something you might want to try. It might help you navigate these kinds of calls for service, and it applies to the sensory component we've been talking about. Number one is, again, you don't know how these individuals are going to receive or perceive the way a touch or an arm around them or guiding them into your police car for their safety. You don't know how they're going to perceive to being touched. So a good course of action is, until you do know how their sensory processing system works, it's best to warn them before you touch them. Tell them what you're doing. Ask them, would you mind if I took your hand and helped you? Or just be very, very obvious and predictable with the way you handle them and touch them. And avoid approaching them from behind. Avoid any kind of unpredictable or fast movements is probably best, and just be predictable and use your judgment until you get a good feel for how they're responding and how they're perceiving the way you're touching them. Second one is it ties to stimming, and you're going to see a lot of these behaviors, these very repetitive or ritualistic behaviors, and understand what they are now. Understand the sensory input they're providing and the calming effect they have, and what they provide to that individual. And if they're not dangerous in any way, if they're not a threat to you or them, let them continue. A lot of our individuals, and my son is on this list, because of this sensory seeking component, you'll see a lot of them get into trouble with inappropriate contact. Well, they'll go up to a stranger and hug them or take a stranger's hand. There's some difficult situations that occur because of a lack of understanding with our guys and society's rules and this sensory thing, the sensory challenge they have combined, where you'll have somebody walk up to a child in a supermarket and take her hand, or things like that, or get too close to a baby because they're curious and they want to see the cute baby and be a little touchy. You'll see things like that, inappropriate physical contact, a lot, and interactions in the world, and you'll probably get called to them, because to somebody who doesn't know what they're looking at, it's a little scary, especially if you have an adult on the spectrum approaching a child. And this is where it gets real dicey for us. Just understand that it exists. Understand that there may be something else besides that person being a predator or some kind of deviant. Approach them with caution, obviously, and perform your investigation. But just know that this is something that exists with people on the spectrum, and be cognizant of it and make your judgment. All right. Another thing you might see, our individuals will resist wearing clothing. They'll shed coats or hats or gloves or shoes, even when it may be dangerous to do so. It may be cold or rainy or snowy outside, and they'll kick their shoes off or take their coat off. And it's because of this sensory thing that they have, and it just feels uncomfortable, and they just feel more free. My son is famous for kicking off his shoes the first chance he gets. That will come into play when we talk about the missing persons component of this. Just understand that it's a possibility. Understand that this sensory system challenge they have often overrides their sense of danger or fear of getting hurt, and just be cognizant of it. Okay? When you get called to these situations like a car accident, and we have to do a first aid assessment, we have to assess people, understand that you'll have a communication challenge with these individuals a lot of times, and B, you'll see them have a higher tolerance of pain quite often than a neurotypical individual. So you got to be careful, and you have to be careful about relying too much on questions and answers. My son could be very injured, and he will not, quote unquote, appropriately answer questions you have for him that we assume that the individual we're speaking to understands. If I ask my son if he has numbness or tingling in his extremities, he doesn't know what numbness or tingling means. Okay, that's a very abstract concept, numbness or tingling. It's very difficult for him to understand what that means. It's even more difficult for him to understand how that's important and what that could mean. You and I know that numbness or tingling in your extremities could mean a significant neck injury or a spinal cord injury. My son doesn't know that yet, and he doesn't know especially that it's important or what's in it for him or why he has a stake in explaining or telling you that he has numbness or tingling. So if you just ask him the question, you go through your assessment, and you're dealing with a teenager and you're just asking questions that you think they should understand and assume that they know why it's important that you're asking, you can get into trouble and you can miss some things. So don't rely on yes or no questions or questions and answers during your assessment. Rely more on tangible, medical, palpable assessment techniques. Feel for deformities. You do your pulse and your radial pulse and blood pressure and all those things that you can actually test yourself, observe, and use for your assessment, as opposed to just questions and answers. Okay, because that'll get you into trouble, and you'll miss a lot if you assume too much about the individual you're asking questions of. Okay. Understand our guys are often very, very attracted to, or they become attached to items, individual items. Some of the items are very common, like a teddy bear or a blanket. My son's favorite item is a cloth diaper that he had since he was a toddler, and it's actually just it's a ball of string at this point. But he has it everywhere he goes, and if he loses it and we try to replace it with another one, he knows because it just doesn't smell right. Okay, they become very, very attached to items. Don't underestimate how powerful this attachment is. And understand that some of the items they become attached to are kind of unique. A lot of our guys are become attached to like a spatula from the kitchen or a wooden spoon or things around the house, whether it's because it's attached to a positive thing that they encounter or they just like it on a sensory level or it just feels good or whatever reason, they become very attached to these things, so much so that they bring it everywhere they go. Why this matters to you is the worst thing you could do is try to take it from them. Unless it's dangerous, unless it can be used as a weapon to hurt them or you, allow them to have that because it's giving them that soothing, grounding feeling, and it's very important for their security that they have it. So if it's not dangerous, allow them to have it. Number two, why it's important is understand that if you are at a scene of a car crash or a structure fire, it's not good enough. It's not enough to have the individual, especially if you know they're on the spectrum, to just stand on the roadside with their parents. They will jump into traffic, go back into that car, even if it's overturned, even if it's on fire and smoking. They'll go back to that car to retrieve their favorite item. It's happened numerous times. They will return to a working structure fire if their favorite toy is in the bedroom. Okay, the only safe place for these individuals is secured, either in the back of your patrol car or in the neighbor's house, someplace physically secured, not close to the scene. And this isn't hypothetical. There are numerous stories of individuals on the spectrum running back into a burning house to retrieve their favorite item. So understand that and don't underestimate the power of that, and be cognizant of it at all times. Okay. All right. Next, we're going on to communication challenges, and it's an important block, and on we go.